He walked away from decades in corporate to build startups in his 50s. Now, Brett Trainer helps 40-plus-year-old founders launch and scale without venture capital. If you think it's too late to start, this conversation will definitely change your mind.
Hi, Mark. Wow, what a great intro. I appreciate that. It's going to have
Absolute
to be cut and
pleasure.
paste.
Yeah, I'm so looking forward to this, Brett. We've known each other for a little while now, and I've been on your show, which was just a really great experience on the Corporate Escapee. So thank you very much for joining me. So the first question I want to ask you is, you describe yourself as this corporate escapee. What does that title mean for you when you started and where you are now?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And we haven't even talked about this little transition that I've been, or an epiphany I had, in the recent couple of weeks. And when I first started the Corporate Escapee, you kind of talked about, I left corporate, and more honestly, corporate kicked me out. I gave them reasons to, but the path was ending for both of us. They kicked me out and forced me to go figure out what I wanted to do. And I'm sure at some point we'll get into that journey. But over time, when I kind of discovered the freedom, right, found my footing, discovered I can make money outside of corporate, start building things. I'm like, there's got to be others like me out there, right, that are stuck in corporate. And when I first started this, call it a movement or just trying to help people get out, is really focused on Gen Xers who have spent decades in corporate, who are stuck and like, is there another way out of this? And so that's where it really started. It was people who wanted to leave their corporate jobs. But the deeper I get and the more conversations I have and the more people I work with and within the community, I started to kind of put a picture together that I wasn't really escaping my corporate job. The job was, I actually kind of liked the work I was doing. It was kind of what I signed up for. It was really it was my reliance and dependence on corporate. And I didn't have control, right? I didn't have control of time. I didn't have control of money, and I didn't have control of my future. It was reactive. We think we have control of the money, but corporate could tell us tomorrow that said, hey, we're going another direction. Profitability numbers aren't there. And all of a sudden the money is not there. So it really kind of helped me tie this into a more macro picture, because maybe the last time we talked, I've got, 100,000 followers across my platforms, but yet only a couple hundred are actually taking action, right? And we talked about I don't care how bad my conversion funnel would be, there's just a lack of movement from folks. And then I had John Arms on my podcast not too long ago, and he shared a stat that 70% of corporate workers are currently burned out, but very few are taking action. So that was kind of my aha moment, that I wasn't the only one that was relying on corporate. I think a lot of us that have been in there more than 5 years, it's what we know, it's comfortable, It's easy. And so now I define the escape as escaping the corporate dependency and moving more towards that control and ultimately the freedom that we want. Even if you're still in corporate, there's ways to take control. So maybe a little longer answer than you were looking for.
No, that's fantastic. That's great. Freedom. That is a very common theme that I have from people that have left corporate experience. And I would say from my own personal experience, the flexibility that working for yourself actually has, compared to sitting at your desk between minimum 9 till 5, in most cases 8 till 6, 8 till 7. When I was in corporate, I did a lot of hours. So what for you does freedom mean? And what does it mean for your people that are in your community as well?
Yeah, I think when I first left, I thought freedom to me was financial control of the future, right? But honestly, once I was out, I realized that it was time. The time was much more valuable, especially as I get older, right? I'm closing in on 60, that time is valuable. And I was wasting a lot of time in corporate, even though they're paying you, and you think about how inefficient your corporate role probably is and how much time you're actually spending on the job they want you to do. It's just, and if you've got the commute, like you said, the 8 to 5, that freedom to me became more things. So I developed just for my own self a little scorecard called the 5 F's. And it's really about your overall happiness. Because again, when I left corporate, it was just to make more money. That was my sole mission. But then I'm like, time's pretty cool. I like this flexibility. Wait, I have time to work out. I'm starting to feel better. Wait, I'm having more time with friends and family to do these things. And so I kind of built just a simple scorecard to say, hey, am I on the right process? What's important to me? And am I heading in the right direction? And so people who maybe haven't heard from me since corporate are like, is this the same guy? Right? Because I was conditioned to think one way, but now I'm like, man, the fulfillment and purpose never would have been in my vocabulary. Now it's super important to me to find, what gives me energy to get up in the morning. So it's definitely evolved, and I'm sure it will continue to evolve, but it's just definitely much more than just the financial impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So just briefly tell me about leaving the corporate life that you did. So just a little, you mentioned it, but just a little bit of background. And then what was the first steps that you did after you left? So why did you leave and what were the first steps?
Yeah. So as you mentioned in the intro, 25 plus years in corporate, mostly in go-to-market. I worked for the same person at 4 different companies, which was interesting because wherever he went, he brought me in, and kind of I landed wherever he had an open position, which gave me some unique exposure in corporate into sales, marketing, got some success. About 2017, 2018, I was in my last, we helped build a startup within a company, but I'm done with corporate. What am I going to do? What do I want to do? And so I had the bright idea. I'm going into management consulting, not just, new wave consulting, but traditional management consulting, because I was focused on B2B and digital transformation. And I saw the opportunity. I'm like, perfect, I can go into consulting. And what was ironic about it is my first gig was a contractor, which paid me pretty well, right? Still give me the flexibility. And if I knew my model then, as I know it now, it was the perfect building block for me to build my solo practice, right? I can start with consulting and start to layer on. Well, what do? I convinced this management firm to bring me on full time and suck me right back into the corporate practice. And about a year after that, I realized I'm like, I lost that freedom, that control that I didn't know I really wanted at the time. And when we kind of agreed to, part ways, that's when I'm like, you know what, that was the kick I needed to go start something solo. I started with solo consulting, and it kind of led to a journey to where I'm now at with the Escapee. But it was, and one thing your listeners may find interesting is about 2 years out, my wife and I were having a conversation, and she looked at me and she's like, what the hell was the matter with you? And she was referring back to when I was still in consulting, right? Because on the surface, everything looked good. It was a good job. Like I said, it was work I had generally liked, and family's doing great. Everything you would think was, hey, he's living the dream. But obviously something was really wrong and unhappy with me, that she could actually pick it out and now see the difference once I was outside of corporate. So to me, it was just, I just kind of hit that, I think it was that tipping point for me. Right. And I kind of forced my hand because I stopped playing the corporate game, right? They wanted me to go to San Francisco and manage some small project just to hit my billable hours, even though don't worry that I hit all my, because I had a hybrid role where I had to bring in new business, but still had billable hours. I crushed the new business goal, but yet they wanted to fly me. I said no, I'm not doing it. So that was probably the beginning of the end at that point. And they figured out that we weren't a good fit for each other going forward.
Yeah. Just want to say thanks, Moritz, for saying hello. Anyone else wants to add comments in LinkedIn, please do. If you've got any questions for Brett, let me know. What do you think the mindset shift that it was from, I'll call it discipline, but I don't think discipline is necessarily a great description, but that routine that you have for corporate versus running your own business. What was that mindset that you had to give? You mentioned it about getting yourself fitter and spending more time with family, but what was the mindset that really shifted it for you?
Yeah, and it's such a good question, because I think it's an underappreciated transition folks have to go through, because for 25 years, my schedule was kind of dictated, right? The meetings you had to attend, the objectives you're going after, travel that you had to do. It was all kind of there. If we had some flexibility, but not much. All of a sudden, when you go solo and start, you own your calendar, you own your priorities, you own everything. And I would say for the first couple months, you're like, this is awesome. But then pretty soon I started to realize that I'm a mess, right? I'm unorganized. I have no structure to what I'm doing. I'm working more hours, getting less done. And at that point, it probably took me a little bit longer to figure out. At that point, I'm like, I need to get some process into this mix because it's just not working. So I over-indexed completely the other way and basically accounted for every half hour of my day. And I'm like, this will be perfect. But then I started to realize this is worse than corporate because now it's so strict that it just didn't work. So, excuse me, over time, I ended up developing my own kind of personal system of time blocks. And those work really well for me because my early mornings are my most productive. I've got my most ideas. So my 3 hours in the morning are sacred, right? Very rarely will I break those because that's when I get the majority of if I have a good 3 hour period there, I get more done than I was, in 2 days within corporate. And I know that even if the rest of my day goes sideways, I've had a productive day. So tweaking and learning how to do that, keeping the flexibility was the biggest one. So I think the mindset is don't confuse busy with action and activity, right? You think you always have to be doing something, but it's just not productive. And all of a sudden you start to burn yourself out because you're always busy and you're not getting closer to where you're trying to get to.
So I did an episode a few months back about being busy and productive and the difference between it, because one of the things that I spotted in corporate was and I'm sure you'll know this type of person, the person that was always running from one meeting to the next. And that was for them to feel like that they were demonstrating that they were being productive. They had to go to this meeting, they had to go to that meeting. Whether it was client facing or internal, it didn't really matter. And they then had to then almost start the work that they needed to do either at the start of the day or at the end of the day. But so much in corporate is down to perception. Like obviously we've got to deliver the numbers when you're doing that, but the perception is so important in corporate. Did you have that same experience?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's the corporate games, right? That's the people that get ahead. And that's kind of one of the realizations when I started having all these conversations with folks in corporate. They've done a good job, right? They do their deliverables, but they just don't like to play those games. Yeah. And if you look at the vast majority of the people that do get promoted, they're excellent at playing the game. So yeah, it's a perception of being busy, and many people, I included, transition with that busy work equating to productive. But once you can separate, because I talked to some folks that have been out for a bit and like, well, I can't get you on the schedule until 6 weeks. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? You run your own thing. How is you not have a gap? And that tells me right there, productive versus busy. They haven't quite figured out how to knock out some of the busy work that's not productive.
What did your friends and family think starting over at 50?
So here's the thing. In hindsight, this is one thing I would have done completely different. I didn't tell anybody. Oh. Right. My wife knew, maybe a few other folks, right, had an idea. And I knew I wasn't going back to corporate. At least I wasn't looking. I'm going to come hell or high water. I'm going to figure out how to make this work. And I didn't tell anybody for 2 years, which makes zero sense in my mind. Why
2 years? Really?
Yes. It was dumb but I think it was that mental, dependency, reliance that I don't want to tell people that I'm doing this because if the perfect corporate job came back or something. And I can't honestly tell you why mentally I didn't do that, because I should have been broadcasting to the world that, hey, I'm doing my own thing. As I found, and you probably found, people are super supportive when you're telling them that you're going out to do your own thing. And so that's what I tell people all the time. If you're still in corporate and dabbling and starting to figure it out, you can't broadcast it. But once you're out, let the world know that you're on this mission to do whatever you're doing. And yeah, it was, again, I look back, I'm like, what an idiot. Why was, I don't know what got me in that mind. Well, the other thing is I didn't have anybody to talk to, right? That's part of the journey is you get inside your own head. And I didn't realize how many escapees were actually out there already, but they weren't talking about it necessarily. They carved their own path, built their business, and were living their best life. But it's not like anybody was gathering and talking about this. So to go from the corporate where you really can't tell anybody you're doing it, and then when you're out, unless you're, like you said, you mentioned you're in a VC or one of these groups, there's just not a lot of folks that there was nobody leading the path in front of me saying, hey, these are the things to be out for. So I'm going to use that excuse as why I didn't tell people. But, in hindsight, I absolutely should have let people know.
Yeah. Are you tired of chasing clients and feeling like the only way to grow is to work harder and harder? Imagine instead having a steady stream of qualified clients coming to you because they know exactly who you are and why they need your help. That's what Christine Campbell Rapin is all about. Christine is the founder of Clear Acceleration Inc. and the creator of Turn On Your Waterfall movement. She works with entrepreneurs and business owners to cut through the noise, sharpen their messaging, and build simple systems that consistently attract clients without burnout and without gimmicks. If you want to discover how to stop chasing and start attracting, Christine has built resources and training designed exactly for you. Her work is trusted by business owners who are serious about creating consistent growth without the overwhelm. So here's what to do next. Go to the description below and click on the link and sign up. Take that first step today and start building consistent growth in your business with Christine Campbell. So I left during COVID.
Okay.
So it was a bit of a challenge being able to, again, like this whole, so the role of networking though, became very clear to me that was, if you're going to build a business and you don't have this huge network of entrepreneurs around you or in your zone, that was one great way to meet people in similar situations, similar experiences, similar ambitions, whether they've been in corporate or never done a job in their life. I found that was one of the best ways to be able to go out and meet people and shared experiences, and some cases learn from their experiences. Sometimes just having an ear to be able to talk about these things is super important. So that was one way that I was able to get into that network. But it's taken a few years to really be able to build that network, and now I've sort of feel I've got a good network around me. But what was your view on networking? Was it something you embraced?
It was something I embraced, but it was super targeted, right? I wasn't as aggressive as I should have been in hindsight, because the one thing I did do, completely unrelated, was I started my podcast while I was still in consulting. Again, freaked out that they'd want the IP and all these other things, which they could have cared less about in hindsight. But what it did, it started breaking me out of that comfort zone in the shell, because originally when I left, I thought I was going to work with smaller, VC-backed companies looking to scale from the 0 to 10 million, right? So I've always had a sweet spot for those businesses. And so I started reaching out to folks in that space for podcast guests, which worked. Again, was my content geared towards networking? Was I doing super targeted outreach? No, but it slowly started to connect me. And I realized that the podcast was a great tool in order to get access to it. But honestly, it wasn't until probably 2 years ago when I started this mission with the Escapee that I really embraced the role of networking. Because again, one of the other things they don't teach you in corporate is how to network. And the only networking you really do in corporate, unless you're internally trying to get a promotion or a raise, you're playing those games. But two is when you're looking for another job. That's the networking you're doing. So going out and building relationships, learning what other people's things are, how can you help other people? Again, I had a close group of folks that I could have those conversations with, mostly the ones that I had worked with, but it wasn't until, much later that I discovered that power. And I was listening to the solo episode you did recapping 2025, and you were talking about the community and the network of being a theme. So true. Because I think everybody is a lone wolf. Lone wolves it just doesn't work. If for the rare person it does, but for me it didn't. And rarely am I finding people that like to go down that path. So like I said, I still think it's part of my learning journey. I'm figuring out how to connect and do a better job with that. But yeah, if you get good at this, that it's an accelerant to whatever you're trying to get to, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Who do you usually work with now, and at what stage do they come in and want to work with you?
Yeah, so it's been kind of an evolution of where it went. And like I said, when I'd say the first 4 years after corporate, it was all around that. How do I help small businesses? I went right back to the sweet spot, the 0 to 10 million. How do I mean, there's some stats, and you may know this, or your listeners who are small business owners, right? That only 1 out of 10, I think maybe it was 1 out of 10 businesses get to $1 million in revenue, which now seems kind of 10% seems high, but only 1 out of 100 actually get to 10 million. And so I became super fixated on that 1 million to 10 million. I'm like, man, if you can grow $1 million business, it's got to be execution that's keeping you from getting to 10, right? Because you've got customers, you've obviously got a product that people like. So I became fixated on that. And that's where my consulting was focused. That's where ultimately then fractional leadership was. And then again, started to figure out some different ways to monetize that corporate experience, but again, helping small and mid-sized companies. About 4 months ago, I made the decision to go all in on building the Escapee ecosystem, really focused on the collective, to see if we can help as many people as possible, not only get out of corporate, but stay out of corporate. And like I said, that's refined a little bit with the mission being, how do we help people take control versus just get out of corporate? I think it's hard to have control in corporate, but semantics on that one. So long-winded answer to your question, it's evolving, because right now 100% of my focus is on helping get those folks that know it's broken, the 70% of corporate workers that are burned out but are staying put, right? How do we help them show a path that allows them to take it? It may not be for them, but at least they have options. But in the bigger picture, on the back end, where I'm starting to work quietly, maybe not some more after the podcast, is how do I take and leverage all this experience that I've got coming into the collective and marry that with small businesses that need access to this type of talent. So as it comes and goes, I'm sure I'll be right back into that 0 to 10 million space again, to seeing how I could help. But for now, it's really those folks that are still in corporate, just left corporate, or have left and haven't quite found their footing yet, or don't have that confidence to stay out.
And I think we've talked about this off of the show, that it's a community that you're building. I think that word just will bring more people towards you, because they will see that you're doing something to help, want to leave, about to leave, have left, what are the next steps after leaving, whether it's a redundancy, whether it's a choice that they have. Being able to bring people together is where your real growth is going to just, I see just really great things. That there are other people doing something like this, but there aren't that many people that are so focused on that community. And I think you're gonna hopefully in the next year plus, you'll be able to grow that community in that way. I think it's a great growth opportunity for you, and I'm sure with your execution, you'll grow something great.
Yeah, I hope so. Plan to. That's the goal. And I think too, part of this has been an interesting journey of, again, in corporate, you just forget how to learn. Sometimes you go through the process, but the 6 years I've been out, it's been much more accepting, learn. And when I, again, just using the community or the collective as an example, right? When I started, it was 2,000 people in a free Slack group. I had no idea what we're going to do, but I knew there was other people that were like-minded. We'll figure it out. And experts then said, hey, it's going to be hard to convert people from a free into a pay. Just keep that in mind as you start to grow. And the engagement from a free is just people. So anyway, just about a year and a half, or no, maybe just a year ago, I went to a paid group. And again, nothing expensive, but I wanted some skin in the game. I wanted more engagement. And after running that for about a year, I found myself starting to look like all the other communities, right? You can join, you can post your message. I use Circle, but it's like Slack. You can post messages. I was running sessions, but my sessions were kind of everybody was welcome in the community to be inclusive. But what I found is the people who were further advanced versus the ones just starting were in different places. And I kind of had this at the end of the year thinking, going through the process, what am I trying to do here? And couple things came to mind. One was that I didn't want to do it the way everybody else was, because I just don't think you get value. So I ended up segmenting the community by peer groups, so people still in corporate would get partnered with people in corporate, $3K per month, $10K per month, and then $25K, because they would have similar experiences. They can vent, share, collaborate, and then create other events within the system that cross-pollinate, right? Because I think it's important to learn, and the collaboration is so important. So we'll see if we've figured it out. But I've also, part of what that challenge, and maybe your audience will get value, is what I don't want to do, right? Because what I was thinking was, we got community, I can offer a course, I can do a mastermind, and just, the traditional course developments. But where I found that I think I can add the most value is that upfront education, communication, collaboration, building those relationships, and then plug people into the rest of the ecosystem, right? There's networking groups that do a very good job of this. There's fractional groups, there's consulting groups that, if I can just be that place that people can come and ask questions, right, and start to learn. So anyway, that's the bet I'm making here in 2026, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. So what do you usually tell a 40 plus year old when they've left corporate and they want to start a business? What's usually the first thing that you tell them?
Don't overthink this, right? Because part of it is we want to analyze. We don't want to take any chances. We worry about if people are judging us. And then, like, the first step is just to do the old Nike slogan, just do it. And it's hard. It's really hard to get that mind shift back because in corporate, right, you had to, don't make mistakes, right? Make sure you get 6 people to review this before you send it out. And this is much more of, go have that. You've got 20 years of wisdom. Businesses need your help. I guarantee you, and I have these conversations all the time. If you went and talked to a small business owner tomorrow, they would get value from having this conversation with you. And I don't care what functional area you are in the business, finance, marketing, sales, they would get value because of what you've already learned and what you can share. So the biggest thing is just not to spend 6 months planning the perfect website, the perfect pitch deck, the perfect offering, and just go start to have conversations. Back to your networking piece of just start, build some momentum. Because I think the 2 milestones that I try to get people to think about, the first one is get that first win. That first dollar outside of corporate just kind of unlocks a lot of things. So don't swing. You don't have to swing for the home run on the first one. It's great if you get the super big deal, whatever you're trying to do out of the box. But if you get that $2,500 or $1,500, I don't know, $500 advisory engagement, it opens the door. Because for me, that there's kind of that 2 steps. The one is that first momentum, and then the second one, it took me about 2 years to get, and I'd be curious to get your perspective, is that 2 years, I'm like, all right, I know this now. Now I know how to make money. I can go make money. It may not be the ideal way, but I figured out how I can take my experience and go figure this out. And I think that was the real unlock, is when you get to that point where you know that corporate's not there. You can always go back to corporate, but I tell people, go in eyes wide open. You're in control. If you go back in, use it for your purposes, not their purposes. But I don't know, did I even answer your question? I took it. It
does. Because what I'm thinking is, there's probably people listening, watching, that are in that situation where they're in a corporate job. They want to make that move, and they might be 20, they might be 30, 40, 50. And it's just, I loved what you said about, like, make your first dollar, make your first pound, like, just prove that you can do it. and that should build into the next deal and the next deal and the next deal. And winning your first client is very different. Like you sounded like you had experience of sales and communicating and sort of getting clients. Some people are very technical and they have to learn the sales and marketing aspects of small businesses, which is a real challenge for people that have been very technical and been very good at the technical side, but not been really that knowledgeable about the marketing and sales. So I would say every business owner needs to be a marketing and sales specialist to be able to be successful, because if you don't bring a client in, no one else is.
Right.
So for me, that was something that I had relationships that I was building, part of new clients and that, but I think for me it would be get a grounding in marketing and sales for small business owners to then be able to work out where the next deal's coming from.
Yeah, and I think one of the mindsets or the frames that I use with folks is, as I joke, sales finally caught up to me, because I'm not a used car salesman. I'm not the use these sales techniques and push scarcity and all. I mean, those tactics, you could train me for 2 years and it would never be comfortable for me to have those conversations. Right. What kind of flipped it for me, and it works, and I actually used this on my daughter when she had an internship, was, and let me take a step back. So when I was still in corporate, before I went into consulting, I was tasked with finding out why our best salespeople were the best salespeople. And we probably had 225 total sales reps in the company. We had inside sales, telesales, and then our national accounts. And so I went through and looked from a performance standpoint, who were our best, and then I sat down with them. I interviewed them. I watched what they did. And you know what? The core thing that they were really good at was really two things: problem solving, and the customer believed that they could solve their problem. They weren't salespeople. They were literally, the customer believed that, oh my gosh, this person has the experience and he can solve this problem. And I don't care if it was like set national accounts, the inside sales, which is a little smaller deal, or telesales. That was what was the difference. And so then I started to, and I used my daughter as the example. She was, at the trunk club, but she had the opposite problem. She was like, I don't mind cold calling and telling strangers to come buy, clothes. But it's when people, it's like when she had access to my friends in my network that she was going to try to sell. She's like, I feel weird trying to sell. I'm like, you're not selling them. You're solving a problem. They don't know how to dress. They don't like their wardrobe. You have a solution for them. That's it. Yeah. And if you can flip that to say, here's the problem I'm solving, and in order to solve this, it's going to cost, this to do it, or we can do it a couple of different ways. And I know that's still a difficult transition for folks. It helped to reframe it as a problem, right? And a fee to solve it. But then I also said, think about it from a job interview. When you're going to interview for a position, I don't care what it's in, we'll use marketing. You're going in to be a director of marketing, you're meeting with the chief marketing officer. When you're interviewing with that person, as the interviewee, I'm asking, what's the situation? What are the key responsibilities? What's going to make me successful? What are some of the challenges that are going on right now? I'm going to take that information and think, is this a job that I can do? And is I want to do? It's the same thing. You're getting in front of a business owner. You're listening to the challenges that they have. What are the problems they have? Asking the questions and thinking to yourself, is this something I can solve or not? So I 100% agree. We got to get better with the marketing and being able to talk about ourselves and doing those things. But I think a good baby step just to start that mind shift is to think about it that way. Then it's not as daunting if I have to go from technical straight to a sales and marketing expert. I think there's a transition you can follow.
There is, and you're absolutely right. Asking really good questions that open up the customer or the client, and then finding out those problems and seeing if there's a solution. The number of times I've spoken to people that are just pushing, whether it's a solution for my problem or not, they're just pushing. And that now has like a really knee-jerk effect, I think, on most people.
Right.
So finding that finding a problem that you can solve as a sales process, 100%. It's where you're going to get conversations rather than a pitch fest. And most people are now being turned off by pitch fests. It just doesn't feel we've been hit by the used car salesman for too long now. It's a different game.
It is a different game. And I think too, the other piece of advice I have for folks is when you go in, and again, I was completely guilty of this for the first 2 years, because either consulting or when I was looking for fractional, I was only looking for like the 6-figure deals to do this. It was go big or go home. And what I found myself doing in hindsight, reflection, is pushing my solution, which was, consulting agents, this is how we do that, or my fractional, instead of listening and going, man, they really don't need a fractional in this part. They just need somebody to come in, 5 hours a week to help them get this set up and be a strategic thought partner. And just don't go in with your solution. Over time, if you want to get really good and then say, I'm only going after customers that want to buy this, 100%. But in the early days, think about how you can do it. And maybe there's a lower friction, lower cost, right, that gets you into that business to help you start it. But I see a lot of people forcing, hey, this is what my offer is, and I've got to go in with it when I'm meeting with potential clients. And you got to find that needle in the haystack if you're going to do that. So anyway.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. What role has your podcast played in growing an audience as well as a client base?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, you and I have talked, and you probably look at me sometimes like, man, you could be doing so much more with this podcast. And which I agree, I am. But, for me over time, it's funny. If you look back at the 6 years, the podcast kind of mirrors my journey outside of corporate, right? It was hardwired for growth, right? Back to how do we get these folks, these small businesses, to compete with the bigger businesses, really start scaling these types of things. VCs, so I create all these introductions. And then it started to transition a little bit when I moved more focus on just small businesses in general. And it became a curiosity solver for me, for lack of a better word, because I had authors on talking about all sorts of things that were curious to me about how do I grow a small business, or ultimately then it became an escapee, grow their personal businesses in these types of things. And it became a really good learning tool. I mean, I had like Jesse Cole, the Savannah Bananas, was on here. I don't know if you've seen, the Savannah Bananas baseball team over in the UK yet, but it's one of the biggest things going here. I had him before he got big. Like Michael Easter wrote The Comfort Crisis, right? So it gave me access to people I never would have had access, or the confidence to even reach out to, just to say, hey, can we have a conversation? It wouldn't happen. But on the business side, initially, it definitely favored more of my guests, right? My guests ended up with more business than I did through the podcast, just because I was connecting people that, hey, this guy solves this problem that I have, and she does this here, and it worked. Now I'm getting a little more intentional about sharing the learning, so I'm doing more solo episodes that just kind of stream of conscious. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm seeing. And pushing out more valuable, I think, valuable content to what the audience is. So I'm still trying to figure out and harness the power of the podcast, but it's been I wouldn't trade it. I highly encourage anybody that's just thinking about getting their thoughts down. A podcast is a much easier way than sitting down and writing something for the first time personally. And I think we're all going to be our own little media companies anyhow. So if you got something to say it into a microphone, because then you can use it 15 different ways once you get out of it. So
and it's fun. Like this is what I think about my show, and we try different things and try and build it and try and grow an audience as well as a client base. And the thing that people often say to me, excuse me, that I need to write a book, but I have no interest really in writing a book. It's not fun. Like, put me on a show every week or a couple of times a week. I will have those conversations. I will create content for solo episodes as well. It's a fun experience to do. So, but you've written a book as well, haven't you, Brett?
Written, but not published.
Okay.
And so I was kind of chuckling when you were saying that, because when I started the podcast started because I was working with an editor 6+ years ago on a book, and she said, you should start a podcast, because then by the time the book's done, you'll have an audience. I'm like, that's brilliant, but what the hell is a podcast, right? And so 6 years later, the podcast is what, 350, 360 episodes in, and yet the
Brilliant.
book is over the holidays, New Year. I did get a completed draft done. So my goal is by the end of Q1 to have it not published, but finally done. So yes, it's coming, but I'm with you. I enjoy this aspect a whole lot more than I was enjoying the writing piece of it. So.
Yeah, I've still not done it. I've been told, and people have made suggestions for me, and they've even said like transcribe shows and turn them into chapters, but it's not for me at the moment. Maybe when I'm, I don't know, 65, 70, and I feel like I've worked everything out, then maybe a memoir. But no, it's not for me personally at this stage.
Well, I'll keep you posted, because once I do get, and I just had somebody on the podcast yesterday, Catherine Jelnick. She's started a company called oh my God, she's going to be so mad that I forgot, but it's basically a shorter book, right? That they're, and she's really going to kill me that I can't remember the name of it, but look up Catherine Jelnick. But this is what she's done. And, but her concept is shorter books that people consume, right? Because her idea, and the data showed that people at Borders, when they had ebooks, that they would pick and choose, never ever finish them. So why write a long book when you can get all of your thoughts into a more consumable book? And I'm like, that's exactly, that's where I'm focused. So I'm not writing the memoirs. It's going to be in 100 pages. It's going to be something you can consume in an hour or two, just to get the main points across. So,
your personal brand, the Corporate Escapee, did it start did you know it was going to grow into what it has? Like, tell me, like, at the start, like, your personal brand, what did you think a personal brand was? And now, number of years later, having successfully turned it into a personal brand, what were your experiences with that?
It's a great question, and it's probably very different. When I first started, I thought the personal brand is I had to get all my thoughts, and all my thought leadership is my personal brand. And over time with the podcast and then doing more writing, it became more of what's kind of top of mind for me, and not just chasing the algorithms of those types of things. But where it really flipped it on the head for me was, we didn't talk about on this, I think we're offline, we've talked about, and really was on my show, that when I started the Corporate Escapee, it was really just can I help other Gen Xers get out of corporate? There was no offerings, no websites. It was just me on LinkedIn talking about Gen X and escaping corporate and the Corporate Escapee. And I was focused on Gen X because that's what it's easier to relate. 6 months, and I did rebrand the podcast. I'm like, maybe I will catch some folks. That's where my focus is. That's what I'm passionate about. It was crickets, literally crickets. So the personal brand was nothing. And literally I hadn't published it yet, but I went back to the old, Hardwired for Growth podcast. I had the skin ready to go back for the next episode that was coming out. And I made the fateful decision just to goof around on TikTok of all the platforms. And I wish I could tell you it was a strategic decision, that it was this Hail Mary that we're going to see it, but it was just more of a timing that, so it was 2 years ago. And I'm like, you know what? I got a short attention span. TikTok's short. Maybe I'll just do some ranting videos about corporate on that and see where it goes. And, the first few, it was just an outlet for me originally. Maybe a couple hundred people viewed the video on a good day. But I think about 3 or 4 weeks in, I had one that got to like 5,000 views. And then a couple of others that started to pick up. All of a sudden, my followers went from 8 to 1,000. Then all of a sudden we hit 10,000, and it opened up the creator economy. I'm like, this is awesome. I have no idea what I'm doing, but this is fantastic. So what do I made the mistake then. I'm like, well, shit, maybe I should take this seriously, because it's now becoming a thing. Because at 10,000, you get into the creator program and they start paying you for your videos. I'm like that. So the dopamine, all of those things were starting to kick. So I went more polished, more scripted with and the numbers went. So I'm like, all right, I'm done with this. And I just went back to myself, 5 days a week, and mostly in this setting, more just on my phone, unedited, Occasionally when I'm out walking or I have a thought, I'll record something, but it's unscripted, unedited, less probably 2 minutes, 5 days a week. And as of this morning, I think I was closing in on 78,000 followers.
Amazing.
And what I didn't know at the time when it hit was who are these followers, right? And 60, I think last look, over 60% of my business or followers were over the age of 40. And I think if I look at my total demographic now for the escapee from the 30 up, it's almost 80%. But then I'm also thinking, are these people even in corporate? Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely were, because the one thing I'll tell you that changed everything for me was, again, I didn't have an offer, didn't have the community, didn't have Slack, anything. So I offered free 20-minute mini strategy sessions. Is corporate or life outside of corporate for you? 300 and I forget the exact number, 330 people signed up for those slots. And amazing. That's when about 100 conversations in, I'm like, man, I maybe I have stumbled upon something here. Yeah. What am I going to do with this? And then that started the whole journey. So I'm still posting on TikTok, and and again, I used to apologize for it. That's saying that's on TikTok. Now I'm like, you know what? It built this entire thing. TikTok did. So
amazing.
Just because I took a chance and went with it. So
amazing. That's a great story. It's a fantastic story. How do you think you've evolved as a leader?
That's a good question. I think I've always viewed myself as really the more of the execution, the number two, not the get out in front of this thing, right? I've always liked the operational aspect. How do we because again, when I went to work for the same guy 4 different times, right, I know my role. Provide advice and say, hey, I'll always give you my perspective. I had kind of the lead role within when I went into management consulting, because I was building out that practice, and it was different. And I learned a lot through that process. And it wasn't necessarily leading other people per se. I mean, because it was no direct leadership, but it was, how do I get the rest of the organization behind me to do these things? So I think I've really learned that after going solo, because you almost have to, right? Yeah. Because you can't rely on anybody else. It's got to be on you. And I think the biggest change for me occurred when I stopped worrying about what other people think. And maybe it's just a gift that this no longer bothers me, and I don't know if it was just a detox from corporate where we had to care what other people thought, but that was the biggest thing. Cause then I could be me, right? What's important to me and where is this driving to? And the thing for other folks and giving back to this, it just opened up a world when I made that transition. So, I don't know, again, did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, you did. Because a leader changes over the time. And as you say, you had to take from primarily a number two role into leading your business, leading people in your community. So I think it's a totally valid point. Thank you. What would you say your risk appetite is now, and how has it changed over the years?
I would say it's much higher now, but I don't think it's as risky as I thought. I think the risk was always built up into my head. So it was completely risk averse, or I wouldn't have stayed in corporate for 25 years. I think I mentioned I had a couple entrepreneurial ventures over the course of 25, but always ended up back into the comfort of corporate. And once I realized, and I had somebody, I forget who it was, on the podcast not too long ago, he was super nervous. He was a 1-year escapee. He was at EY for a year, right. And left. And what his secret to this was, he reminds himself, what's the worst thing that could happen? Is somebody going to die? Is somebody I like going to die? No. And he's like, it ain't that bad, right? Now, We know there's spectrums that if you're earlier in your career, less responsibilities. The older you get, there's more responsibilities that you have. But I think the risk is it's I don't say self-inflicted isn't the right word.
It's self-created, isn't it?
Self-created. Because when you think about it, a lot of people stay in corporate because it's the right thing. It's the safer thing. I would give you 10 points why it's not the safer, especially in the States with the layoffs that are happening. Yeah. AI, these CEOs are now aligned with profitability more than ever in the short term. So there's just no reward for performance. So you staying in corporate isn't a guarantee. So there's no safety in that. Yeah, when you have a paycheck, it's safe. When that paycheck goes away, what are you going to do? And so I think finally having that realization that the risk isn't it's self-manufactured, right? And
Yeah.
we need to rely on ourselves more than we do. We actually have a lot more. I haven't met anybody that couldn't escape because they're smart enough. They've paid their dues. They know how to do things. It's just, one, do you want to do it? And two, is it right for you? Right. Those types of things. So I think it's the mental aspect of it more than anything.
Because no, I totally agree. Look, we're coming to the end of the interview. I ask the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They're quick-fire questions. They don't need a quick-fire answer. I think I know what the answer to the first question is. First question is, what's the best decision that you made?
Oh, yeah. Well, the one that corporate made for me, I think it was joint, but sending me on this path, though, it really was self-discovery in a sense. And knowing that, hey, my goal is to be, again, I've got myself in shape. I'm the healthiest I've ever been, all because of this, because I want to live to 95 healthy. And so that gives me at least another 30 years. What the hell am I going to do? Right. So that was the thing that jump started me to go from directionless to a direction. And and again, I don't live too much in the past, but if I could have figured that out a little bit earlier, it would have been better. But, or at least having that plan earlier would have been much better.
The word that is springing to mind talking to you is purpose. And I think you found your purpose to be able to help people grow, help people develop, help people get out of toxic situations and relationships. I definitely feel that you found your purpose with this corporate escapee.
I think so. And, interestingly, because again, coming out of corporate, I'm like, that's woo woo, right? Purpose, man. We need to get paid. We need to do these things. And the way I at least convinced myself as I was going through, again, reflection is huge. It would have been easier if I saw it in real time, is this entire post, 6-year run is all been about energy. What's giving me more energy? And right now the escapee is I get up, there is no bad days, right? Or there's bad days, but I mean, there's not a day I don't get up going, hey, I get to go do this, right? And it's the energy. Now, will I have the same energy in 2 years for this, or do I unlock something else? So yeah, I think I kind of interchange energy with purpose, but I think
that makes sense.
Accomplishes the same thing.
Yeah. Second question is, what's the best piece of advice you've been given?
Oh man, I think it goes back, and it was something I didn't take, is trust yourself, right? It's put that value. You are valuable, and you have the skills to do this. So I think it is, I don't know if it's trust or confidence or courage. Maybe it's all three. Because I think when I made that leap to just test the waters, starting a podcast, that was super uncomfortable for me. I still don't like.
But what was the advice that someone gave you that confidence?
It was I guess it wasn't one piece of advice. So I'm sorry for screwing up your answers here, but it was really around that trust and taking the control of it. And it was an old colleague of mine that had moved on to a partner role in another place. And two pieces of advice. I guess the other one that will probably, the one that I still stuck to this day, is done is better than perfect. And even when I was in consulting, he's like, Brett, you just got to get this done. You're never going to get perfect. And so maybe that's a better answer for your overall question. One is trust yourself. That was the biggest thing for me. But how do I do that? Is done is better than perfect has been a game changer for me. And I still need to remind myself almost on a daily basis that this doesn't have to be perfect, and done is better than perfect. So I'm going to amend my answer to that.
Thank you. So there's a guy called Rob Moore who's in the UK. He does real estate and personal brands and stuff. And he wrote a book, and I just love the premise of it. Start now, get perfect later. That, for me, it's just like that. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Like, you start it, you won't get it perfect first time, but it's an evolution. My show is a complete evolution, and if anyone wants to go back and listen to the first episode, you'll see that it wasn't very good. But like, start now, get perfect later is just a great premise, and I share that with people all the time because I just think what a great way to just kickstart you on that journey, on that process, on that way to do that. So
yeah. Can I add just one more quick one? I know it's just,
yeah,
well, because I think that this one is, as I thought it was as important, is you have to enjoy the journey. Again, it seems so obvious, but if you're only driving towards an outcome, you're going to miss 3 years of your life. And so again, that was one of the biggest changes. And it was a football coach that wasn't directed to me, and it wasn't even his speech directed to me, but he's like, if you trust the process, eventually the process will love you. And then he went on further to explain that it's really about, if you're not enjoying the process and smelling the roses, again, it seems so obvious, but that one was also a big one. Cause I make it that I talk about that scorecard. It's about where you are in the process, not what this outcome is. So you don't get this point. So anyway,
absolutely. Who's the person that's helped you most in your career?
Wow. Well, I think two, right? The one, Charlie, who I worked for at 4 different organizations, had the confidence in me to bring me in. The first time I was in customer service, he was in sales, but he saw that I could run an internal center, so took a chance and then trusted me to come in and help him build whatever he was building. But then I would say Calvin, shout out to, who's my counterpart in consulting, when he was teaching me the ropes. So he really showed me what it's like to be kind of a professional in a delivery setting, because my entire world was in corporate, and this is how it is when you're actually customer facing. And so I think those two probably have the biggest impact overall, one in the corporate, the other one in, the confidence and the ability to, because I think part of what are the challenges when we leave corporate is we undervalue ourselves. And that part of it comes over time once you realize that, I really can add a lot of value to this organization, but sometimes it's hard to see that. And he helped me accelerate because of that process. So
absolutely. All right. Next question. Tell me about a regret that you have.
Oh boy. You know what? I think it was, I think I hit my breaking point with corporate back in the financial crisis, 09, 010. And I gave it a shot. I started a digital marketing agency, probably the worst possible time to start a business, but I just didn't have enough confidence and belief in myself that I knew that wasn't the path. We had some success, but it just wasn't the right path for me. And instead of believing in myself that I could go, I should just, kind of meander and figure what part of this, I took the easy route back into corporate, right? And it was another 8 years of corporate that I was on the breaking point of figuring out how to take control for myself and didn't. That's probably one of the bigger ones. And it's funny coming back full circle, because I was the first one in my family that went to college. So I didn't know what corporate was. I didn't even know what business was, right? It was blue collar. My goal before I went to college was I was going to be a game warden. And what that is, it's the folks that patrol the lakes to make sure people have fishing licenses. I'm like, could you imagine a better life on a boat out on the lake in Wisconsin, just cruising? And it's funny. And I said, now if you'd asking me what's my 10-year goal, where do I want to be? I want to be on a lake in Wisconsin. so maybe you could say the roundabout way I'm going to get there, but I don't know if I would trade much though, because everything led to something else, and I've got a beautiful family, so I'm not complaining. Just certain things I probably would have done differently, but you don't know, right?
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
That's one of the things in business, which is really true. Next question. Was there a time when you wanted to give up in your corporate escapee journey, and what made you pull through?
Yeah, multiple times, right? Because, one was when I took the flyer on TikTok, I had pulled the plug. As much as I believed in it and as much as I knew that at the time and it's still mostly just I could help people, it just wasn't there. And I didn't think I had the perseverance to stick it out. But fate intervened with TikTok, basically saying, hey, no, this is the path that you should be going on. And thankfully it was from that point. No, I've known that I don't know what it's going to look like, but there is a path with this world, and just seeing people get out of that corporate and have that success. And it's not all roses, right?
No,
I,
there's
I
tough
joke
times as well.
that, when folks, and my favorite story is, yeah, he was dead set. I'm like, I'm leaving corporate. So he gave notice like 2 months out. I'm like, all right, you could build on the inside and go. He's like, nope. So I'll never forget the week he gave. So his notice was, so he's actually done. So this is his first week as a solo. And if you've ever seen the movie Anchorman with, Ron Burgundy,
Yes.
when he's in the phone booth in the glass case of emotion, I'm telling you, within the 24-hour period, he's like, this is the greatest thing I've ever done. He's like, oh my God, what did I do? This is the dumbest thing I've ever done. And all those emotions within a 24-hour period just were there. But when people get to that, like I said, that aha moment that, you can do this, there is no better feeling. And rarely do I come across folks that have found it that said, yeah, I'm going back to corporate. My favorite one was a guest on the podcast, Lainey, and I still use her quote and I just said, Lainey, is there any chance? And she's been out for 10 years. So she was one of the OGs doing this. I'm like, Lainey, any chance you go back to corporate? She's, Brett, I'd rather be homeless. I'm like, okay, there you go. So that's the emotion you feel when you can finally break free and take that control. But yeah, it's so that for sure is the most satisfying.
Brilliant. Tell me something that most people don't know about you.
I would say fun. I'll give you a fun fact, and this probably won't. I'm too old. The Bears had a Super Bowl quarterback named Jim McMahon. I actually sold him a rocking chair when I was in high school. So I guarantee you there's not many people that know that story. But yeah, I was sweeping floors at a furniture store. I think it was 14 or 15 just to make some money. And he came in, and for whatever reason, and this wasn't a huge store, right? The one salesperson wasn't there. Sold him the rocking chair, throw it in the back of his pickup truck, and I had a story to tell for the rest of my lives. And unfortunately, it's the last time the Bears won the Super Bowl was with him. But
you need to sell a chair to the next Chicago Bears quarterback.
Caleb Williams,
there
go
you go.
full circle. So I'll have to there's a good partner sponsorship opportunity for me. I'll partner. We'll get Caleb a rocking chair. His wife was pregnant. That was the whole thing. He came in, he picked it up. So yeah, that's my claim to celebrity fame.
Amazing. And last question, what does legacy mean to you?
Oh, that's become even more important. I don't know if I've defined it for myself yet, but I've got 3 girls. All now are, one's married, 2 will be married here in the next couple of years. Just had our first granddaughter about a year ago.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And it just changed the entire perspective of what I'm working for, what I'm trying to do. And again, part of it, I think the legacy, what I, at least in my mind right now, is to prove that, man, I'm going to go build something at the age of 58, right? That most people like, well, what am I going to do? Retire? I'll go play golf 2 or 3 times. I'm like, no way, man. This is chapter 2 or 3 or whatever you want to say. And again, I think part of what I want to show them is I don't want to say it's not over, but you can do what you want. And part 2 of that was, one of my daughters is in corporate, had the baby. Corporate America no longer works for her, right? If she's got to go back into the office and do these things, and like, man, if I can't even help her figure out how to live a life that, still make a little bit of money, but do it on her terms, I'm like, then I've got the concept of this collective the wrong way. So those are the biggest one is just family and showing, but part 2 of that is being able to help your own daughter.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Brett, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure interviewing you and finding out more about you and your now new journey with the Corporate Escapee. I think you're doing great things there. Everyone, please do check it out. Please do go to the Corporate Escapee and find Brett. And thank you very much, everyone, for listening and watching. If you'd like to find out more about the show, please go to www.businessgrowthtalks.com. And thank you very much. Thanks, Brett.
I appreciate it, Mark. I enjoyed it. Time flew by.
Cheers. Thank you.
Nice. See ya.